Welcome everyone, and thank you again for joining us today for our first session of the third annual Maryland Reproductive Health Roundtable Virtual Learning Series. We are so excited to have you here. I mean that very sincerely. This series will be happening every other Tuesday all summer long through the end of August. We have an amazing roster of speakers lined up. So please make sure you are registered to attend, and as in the previous years, all meeting materials and recordings will be archived and available for your access after the end of the series. To kick off our very first session of this series, we will have Samantha Ritter share an opening statement on behalf of the Maryland Department of Health. Samantha is our new director of the Office of Family and Community Health Services, where she oversees the Maryland Family Planning Program, Adolescent Sexual Health Projects, and the Home Visitation Program. Samantha?
Thank you so much for having me, Charlotte. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here, and welcome to the third annual Reproductive Health Roundtable and Virtual Learning Experience, my first. I can't wait. As Charlotte mentioned, these sessions will be held every other Tuesday through the summer from 12 to 1. We ask that you register for each session. We have a great series planned this year with topics ranging from reproductive justice and infertility to engaging men and partners, to leveraging social marketing for clinic promotion, and wrapping up with the future of abortion care in Maryland. You'll hear from colleagues in the Maryland Family Planning Program and some wonderful guest speakers. We also ask that you share the dates and registration information with colleagues and other community partners, particularly if there are certain sessions that you think would be most relevant for your work together. I want to quickly highlight what to expect from the Maryland Family Planning Program in FY23. We are excited to announce that we were awarded one-time funding to expand telehealth services for Title X services across the state. This will be a great opportunity to reach additional clients, particularly those who face the greatest challenges receiving in-person services. We'll continue with FPAR 2.0, everyone's favorite topic, and we're also excited to launch a needs assessment starting later in 2022. This needs assessment will enable us to better understand and measure the impact of the Maryland Family Planning Program across the state, whether we're prioritizing the appropriate populations and jurisdictions, and will provide recommendations for strategic activities for the next few years. We'll discuss all of this at a later date, but I just wanted to share that we'll be developing a needs assessment steering committee if that piques your interest. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge this unprecedented time in the reproductive health field. Coming on the heels of a very tough few years in the pandemic, we are faced with renewed efforts to limit reproductive health options in the US. While the Maryland Department of Health is fully committed to continuing and, of course, if possible, expanding the incredible work that you're doing in the Maryland Family Planning Program, we expect that the next few years might be difficult, and we are glad to be in this together with you. We thank you for your ongoing support and collaboration, your continued dedication to the communities you serve, your commitment to sharing knowledge and expertise with each other, and as always, your perseverance. I also want to thank the Baltimore City Health Department for their leadership on the Reproductive Health Roundtable series. We are always grateful for their partnership. And personally, as I'm new to this position, working with the Maryland Family Planning Program has been an absolute highlight of the first 6 months of my job, and I'm really looking forward to what's to come. So with that being said, thank you so much for being here, and I'll turn it back to Charlotte to continue with the program.
Thank you so much, Samantha, for that exceptional opening statement, and welcome to our family planning program family. So thank you so much for that. So today's session is presented by Anna Rodney. Anna is the Executive Director and founder of MomCares and Rising Mama, a wellness organization that centers mothers in the delivery of care and support to the entire family unit. Anna Rodney is also a practicing doula for nearly 15 years, a yoga instructor, energy healer, and wellness practitioner based in Baltimore City. Anna serves as a board member for the Bee City Alliance and Maryland Breastfeeding Association, in addition to serving as the chair of the Baltimore City Maternal Mortality Review Board and member of the Fetal Infant Mortality Review Board. Anna Rodney has been acknowledged by the Public Justice Center for her contributions and collaborations in policy and maternal health. Anna is the recipient of the NARAL Maryland Pro-Choice Young Advocate Award, OSI Community Fellowship, Warnock Foundation Award, along with other awards for her service to the mothers of Baltimore City. Without further ado, it is really my honor to welcome our keynote speaker for this year's Maryland Reproductive Health Roundtable Series, Anna Rodney.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Charlotte. I am so glad to be here. I am going to share my screen if possible. Oh, it says I can't share my screen. Not sure why it's giving me a hard time. 3 years of Zoom, guys. We're still trying to figure it out. So again, hello, my name is Anna Rodney, and I am the Executive Director of MomCares. I'm having a difficult time getting my slides to populate, and I'm not sure why. Okay, here we go. We should be in business. Yes, better. So again, hello, my name is Anna Rodney. I want to welcome you all to my presentation, our time together. And so we are currently in the midst of the weight of intersection, identity bias, and justice in the body. And this, if I'm doing my job right, this conversation is going to be difficult. It's going to be uncomfortable, but we need to make sure that we are committing to doing the hard things so that we can do the hard things. And so before we do anything else, I want all of our participants to just take a moment to put 2 things in the chat. One thing that you need in order to feel safe in this space, and one thing that you are willing to bring to facilitate safety for others. I'm going to do that really quickly and just make sure that you are talking to me. I will give a disclaimer. One of my identities is a middle child, so I do need a lot of smiling faces and affirmation because I'm used to needing extra support in that area. So please just populate the chat. Again, one thing that you need in order to feel safe in a space like this, and one thing that you feel like you can facilitate, help to facilitate safety for others. Right. Trust, respect, those things. Open-mindedness on both sides, respect, listening. Yeah, so we've got some great things happening in the chat. Thank you. Continue to populate. We're gonna make sure that we are upholding those things as much as possible. Again, take your time if you need to step away, or if something is really burning you, take your time to step away, and or send me a note if you would like to process later with me. So who am I? Charlotte just gave that wonderful introduction. I, again, am a doula, a lactation peer educator, registered yoga instructor, Reiki master, certified mother roaster, a maternal health advocate, executive director of MomCares, and mother of 2, Aiden and Asher, age 7 and 13 months. And while this may seem that like I am just sitting here tooting my horn as it has already been tooted, I want to make a connection here. As far as identity goes, you have 3 sets of identities. You have how people see you, how you see yourself, and how you want to be seen. For a number of us who have many intersections of identity that are competing with each other and also complementing each other at the same time, this is what I call a makeup identity. When I was in the hospital with my first son in the NICU, and people saw me, the doctor saw me as a fat, Black, single, low-income mother. Those were the identities that people saw me as. I felt the need to make sure that people saw me as how I wanted to be seen and how I experienced myself, because that would make up for all of the identities and all of the biases that people saw when they just looked at me for face value. So my question to everyone is, we have a poll. I want to ask everyone if you have, how has your experience been with managing your identity in the world? And that poll should be populating now. All right. So we're going to end this poll. Get in if you can. I know we're at about 70 folks. I see about 50 people have answered. So currently right now we are at the highest is yes, I felt that I had to address it. So here you should see on your screen what the results look like. With if I didn't notice it, being a close second, and then the third being yes, but I don't feel like I should be bothered. And so we want to make sure that we're seeing what this is saying just within our group as practitioners, as people that are very aware of bias, very aware of identity, our personal experience. And so then we also want to take our personal experience and try to imagine as best we can those of the people that we are taking care of, those are the people that we're committed to taking care of. A couple of definitions I want to make sure that we have all on the same page. And some of these definitions, you might have a different iteration of what exactly it means or the wording, but I want you all just to trust me and just kind of go along with me as far as the definitions that we have here as far as the presentation is concerned. And so implicit bias is a bias or prejudice that is present but not consciously held or recognized. Again, a bias, an implicit bias is a bias or prejudice that is not presently present, that is present but is not consciously recognized. Weathering is something maybe some folks have heard. I'm hoping most folks here are familiar with the term, but weathering is a term coined by Dr. Geronimus in 1992, and it's the hypothesis and research that proposes that the accumulation of racial stress over Black women's lives contributes to their observed pattern of racial disparities in maternal health and birth outcomes that increase with maternal age. One thing I want to share about this is there was a study that was done that measured the health and outcomes of teenage mothers. And the hypothesis was that teenage mothers would have poorer outcomes because they were not prepared for birth and pregnancy. Except in Black women, that was true. In Black women, the outcomes got worse as they got older because of the effects of stress prolonged over the lifespan. So the older you get, the more stressed you are, the more stress indicates outcomes that are poorer than others as the older you get. And so I want to just kind of make sure that we're holding these things in our mind. And then intersectionality is the complex cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in experiences of more marginalized groups of people. So what does all of that mean? Right? That means that there are folks out there that will just see you and form an opinion of you, regardless of their awareness of it or why they have the opinion. They are holding that opinion of you as soon as they see you. That means that for folks that have other have a multitude of identities, some of which are seen as negative to those who have those biases, are going to be under more constant stress because of those biases, and having to combat them or decide, do I address it? Do I not address it? Do I want to make sure people know my makeup identity is here and that I am worthy of respect and not being discriminated against? And having to do that for multiple identities within multiple communities means that even communities that I identify with, I may not completely feel safe. And they also may be a source of stress for me, which means that there is a very small space in which I feel safe and accepted. And that stress affects outcomes. Not only, we're here talking about reproductive health, but I also want to mention that stress affects outcomes overall. So we're going to, if someone can drop in the chat the Jamboard. I have recently found Jamboards and I'm excited about it. So we have a Jamboard in which there's one question about you and your relationship with your identity that I would like us to be brave and populate. We're only going to take a minute on this because I'm rushing through, because I am talking and I could talk for the next 2 hours, but I only have an hour with you. So if we can get that, or maybe I can do that. There it is, and the Jamboard is right there. So we're gonna just take a minute to go through with that. Let me see if I can put the Jamboard up. All right, so yes, I see a bunch of anonymous folks, anonymous coyote, chinchillas, alligators. So what personal identities influence how you are perceived in the world? I'll also add some of my own identities.
Hey, Anna, did you give permission for people to engage with it? I think it's listed as view only on my
No, it
screen.
should be completely open. Okay. We'll have to move. So we're in, for space and time, we're gonna just close this out and we can put it in the chat. I apologize. I knew that I did it correctly. I Googled it and everything, but okay. So if we can just put some of those identities in our chat. Oh, Jamboards. All right, so we got a lot of moms in here. Awesome auntie. Yes, aunties and uncles save my life every day. And so just looking at the attendees here, some of these things, I don't know. I would never know that Sam Akers is an oldest daughter. I do know, having an older sister, that is an actual real identity that comes with actual traits and ways of having to interact with an oldest daughter. And so I want us to, again, think about what this implicates with our clients and the people that we're serving, as far as making sure that they have all that they need as far as it relates to reproductive health. I'll share a story really quick, including an identity. So my son was just born 13 months ago, Asher. And I am grateful enough to know that I am doing pretty well for myself in the world. I also am a single mom by choice, which means that I chose to have a baby, knowing that I did not have a partner. Going into the hospital, everybody outside of my birth team who knew and had been working with me for the last 2 years saw a single Black mom in with her second baby. They had no idea who I was, even though there was a big billboard that was up and populated as I was giving birth of me and my sons. No one knew who I was. And so the way that this translated into my care was that after my son was born and I was working to breastfeed my son in the hospital, the lactation consultant comes in and starts to offer formula and offers WIC as far as formula being a necessary intervention for my son because he was not latching, and proceeded to encourage me to sign up for WIC. It has been years and years since I have been able to match the income requirement to be able to be eligible for WIC. But that identity, that Black single woman in the hospital, meant that I automatically could not afford milk. And I not only that, but I automatically was not going to be able to breastfeed because breastfeeding is something that takes a commitment and implied access that I did not have. And so we want to make sure that who we are working with, and the people that have worked before us, right? So there might have been a mother on the floor that day, that week, or a year who fit a similar profile as me that needed WIC, but that was not for me. Again, we need to make sure that we are paying attention to our families and the identities of individuals, and not just the things that we are populating in our head based on our own experience. So when we talk about disparities in the Black community in particular, disparities have been present in birth and infant health, maternal and infant health, since the beginning of collecting data here in this country. So these disparities have not come in the last couple of years as we've been paying attention to it. They did not automatically pop up after Serena had her baby or after Beyonce had her twins. These things have been persistent and present since we started to look at the data in antebellum slavery. And so what are some of these disparities that we're talking about? So of course, we're talking about maternal mortality, infant mortality, but some of the disparities that are present right now are preeclampsia. The rate of preeclampsia is 60% higher in Black women than in white women. African Americans are at a higher risk for blood pressure issues. They also get it at a younger age and suffer more of the complications of high blood pressure. And the problem is not limited just to adults. Preteens who are overweight also struggle with blood pressure. The prevalence, we just talked about it, of breastfeeding initiation is 84% overall. But for Black mothers, there is a difference of 16.7% between the highest rate of 90.3% for Asian Americans and 73.6% for African Americans. And so these are some of the disparities that we can see. We're going to talk later on in the hour about the social determinants of health. But we need to understand that these disparities are not the issues, are not to be solely laid at the feet of mothers. It is not necessarily just a mother's issue that she has high blood pressure. We have to look at the more structural racism, structural issues, and institutionalized issues that have brought mothers to these disparities. So to continue with these disparities, I'm hoping, and I'm sure a lot of people already know, Black women here in Maryland are 2.5 times more likely to die in childbirth. Black babies overall are more likely to be born at a low birth weight. They're born early and to die in that first year of life. And as far as the numbers that we have, 75% of deaths, maternal deaths in Maryland have been deemed preventable. And so again, this is pointing to a very real issue of someone's identity being the reason why they're not getting the care that they are, and it being deadly. Excuse me. The weight of this is not just coming from hospital or medical professionals. This is coming from the larger community. We want to know that we have to know that Black women are being vilified, as we have been throughout history, right? The Black female body has taken the brunt of the issues that have manifested in this country since the beginning of our occupation here in the country. And so I'm showing this slide because right now we have the very real formula shortage that is rampant in this country. Again, we are a first world country that has excess of food and all types of things to make sure that everyone has. We have to ship out extra things to other people. That is part of who we are as a country. And we are facing a formula shortage. Not only are we facing a formula shortage, but we're facing a shortage that began in February of 2022 and has persisted. It is now almost June. And now is the only time, as people are now bringing attention to it, and the face of it is now white. The white face of the formula shortage is now when the issues are being addressed. So again, I'm asking us to imagine a Black woman, a person of color who has been struggling with this, who's been talking to their pediatrician, who has had issues of initiation because doctors are telling them that it's better to breastfeed, because media is targeting them and saying you need to breastfeed. All of these things, because they might not have the hours at work, they might not have the wherewithal or the support or the money for a lactation consultant when they get home. They might be tired because they don't have additional support, or they might have sexual history of abuse and not want to breastfeed, or they just don't want to breastfeed. All of this is now being exacerbated by the larger community now again attacking the body and saying you should just. Again, something that I say often is if it was just do this or just do that, this would not be a problem. And so we really have to, for our clients and for those who we are supporting in the reproductive journey, we need to make sure that we are blowing up the issue to a large scale to make sure that we are including all of the factors that brought us to this place and making sure that we are advocating and supporting our families to make sure that they have access to what they need. Again, with the just, and breastfeeding is just I just said it, but breastfeeding is the most recent in that call of just do that, right? Just do this. But there are a number of different things that that the community and us as practitioners have laid at the feet of Black women as far as their ownness and their own victimhood. So we also want to talk about the fact that choice is important. We talked about it in the last slide. You have the choice to decide based on what you are given and the things that are in front of you around what is best for you and your family, outside of what everybody expects and is pushing towards you. And so again, that tug of war of someone who may be well-intentioned, acting on their bias to push you to do something that they believe or deem is best for you, you having to work hard to make sure that you are making the decisions that you believe are best for your family, and then the outside world telling you that what you're doing is inherently wrong. If we look at the history of police brutality in this country, we have to acknowledge that police brutality is at its root a reproductive justice issue. If I, as a Black woman, am fearful to bring my Black child into this world because someone else has the power to take them away just because they perceive them as breaking a rule or they perceive them as a threat, that is a reproductive justice issue, and that impacts us again on a daily basis, whether we have children or thinking about children, have had abortions, or want to have children in the future. This is something that is also affecting us. And so you look at the the trends of the war on drugs, the war on crime, the Black woman, the mother, is always at the root of blame for that. If these children had a stable home or a stable or all of the things that they needed, if they went to school, if their parents were available to them, if their parents were more available to them, then this wouldn't be happening. And it almost completely ignores the structural and institutional racism that creates the need for crime, the desire to sell drugs, and the desire to do other things. It also ignores the fact that Black people are not the only ones that are engaged in crime, that are engaged in violence and or drugs. And it creates a picture for the larger community to then use and incorporate into their own bias that this is the profile of a Black person. Well, how am I doing on time? I'm so fast. Okay. And so then, as we're talking about the structural and institutionalized racism that has brought us to a point of being insecure in our reproductive rights, we have to talk about safe housing, transportation, racism again, education and job opportunities, access to nutritious food, polluted air and water, and language and literacy skills. All of these things are a recipe for health issues, health disparities. And when you look at Baltimore in particular, you'll see that we have the highest rate, we have one of the higher rates in the country of food deserts. We are constantly bombarded by the news and social media around racism and violence. Even in the larger media, the things that are being communicated about people from Baltimore are what? The Wire. Now We Own This City. Again, I have not been able to watch it, but that is also a police drama. And so we are painting this larger picture that Baltimore is a space of violence and destitution and hopelessness. And for all of those here who are in Baltimore, we know that that is not the picture of Baltimore that we walk our dogs in, that we take our kids to school in. That is not the reality that we're living, but these are the things that we are being fed. Again, when you talk about housing, not only safe housing, but the idea of blighted houses. Studies have shown that when you live in a neighborhood of abandoned homes, it starts to affect your mental health. Again, all of these things, we need to go back to the idea of stress and how it is incorporated into the body and how it manifests in disease. Stress is one of the main exacerbators of disease in the body, which can lend itself to part of the reason why we're seeing disparities at such high levels for people that are managing all of the intersections of life, being Black and in the reproductive justice, in need of reproductive support and help. I'll also mention something that's heavy on my mind, that we are also dealing with. Along with the formula shortage, we're also dealing with the Roe versus Wade decision and that very interesting document that was published. I'm trying to stay middle of the road here, but that interesting document that was published. And we also need to recognize something that our communities are saying that is a bias of our own, is that abortion is a white woman's issue. Black women keep their babies. Black women are having their babies. This is only happening. We are only worried about this because we are trying to preserve white women. And unfortunately, when you look at the numbers, Black women disproportionately are having more abortions than any other racial group in the country. And again, we need to point back to the social determinants of health, the way that access, stress, racial discrimination all play into these numbers. And so none of these numbers, none of these things that I'm sharing are being shared in a way of damning or making someone feel worse or placing judgment. But we need to understand the entire picture of how your identities, how our identities play into the larger picture of health and reproductive health. And so, in ending, I want to make sure that we have a specific call to action. What can you do as a provider, as someone who is working with this community on a regular basis, has these people in their office, has these people calling on them for support? What can you do? Number one, and I am biased on this. I will acknowledge my bias, but we really need to work on incorporating grassroots and community-led programming into institutions. That is not the same thing. I will say it again, that is not the same thing as stealing the information and the intellectual property of grassroots organizations and community-led organizations and implementing your own programs. We need to incorporate and pay grassroots organizations and community-led organizations to work with alongside the institutions that have caused harm for so long and are saying that they are interested in reversing that harm. And so if we are actually interested in reversing that harm, we need to lock arms and work together. We need to release some of the power, some of the resources, some of the access that institutions hold and have held for the duration of this country to community-led organizations. Again, that means funding programs. That means working with programs to create policy to make sure that those programs are supported and flourishing. And then focusing on your work, making sure we all have our own lane. For instance, I am a Reiki practitioner. When someone comes to me for Reiki, I am not checking their vitals. I am not doing the little thing on their knee and making sure their reflexes are working, right? Because I am a Reiki practitioner. If in our session, it comes up that there may be a medical issue, I will refer to a doctor. And what we're finding in the community setting is that hospitals and other institutions are trying to work to be the catch-all for all things and all opportunities to work and engage with community. And in the same breath are acknowledging that they've caused harm. And so because of that harm, we need to acknowledge that there needs to be a step back made, and we need to put those grassroots and community-led organizations at the forefront and trust that the work is being done. And then also making sure that you're staying aware of how opportunities that are being given to these grassroots organizations and these organizations outside of institutions are servicing populations and are going to serve the community. We need to be intentional. This work is hard. This work is uncomfortable. We have gotten to this space. These disparities have become present because of generations and generations of wrongdoing. It is going to take generations and generations and generations of right doing, humility, and moving out of the way and creating space for a plethora of different tactics, organizations, and perspectives to make sure that we are correcting the crisis that is happening within the reproductive justice, reproductive health arena. And so I'm going to take a breath and open it up for questions, comments. I would really like us to spend the next couple of minutes in a real conversation. I appreciate being supported and invited to be a keynote, but my excitement to be here was because I wanted to talk and have a conversation with those who are in attendance.
Well, Anna, I will say that was exceptional and so insightful. So thank you for walking us through that. And we do have some questions that have popped up in the chat box, and I encourage folks to throw their questions in there as well. You're also welcome if you want to raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask a question. You know, as Anna said, like, let's really use this time. We've got like a whole 15 minutes left to engage and discuss and really learn and grow from each other. So a question that did come up, Anna, that we would love your thoughts on is, and this really pertains to so much of our audience today, as health service professionals, how do we find balance between making sure the families we serve are aware of all the resources that are available and making sure we are not offering things based on what we may perceive that their needs are?
I think And so I want to, number one, acknowledge that medical professionals, health service professionals, usually have a very tiny window of time to spend with clients. And it's very difficult to make sure that you're saying all of the things and have all of the resources. And sometimes it is easier to hand off a pamphlet or a folder of pamphlets. So I want to first acknowledge that. But I also, on the other side, want to acknowledge that as easy as that is, that paperwork, that those pamphlets or whatever, that information that is being handed off is going home and finding its way on a desk, in the trash, left in the car, left behind on the bus, right? And so we really have to be intentional about system shifts. So this conversation and the things that I shared today were not about necessarily an individual. We need to really look at these systems that are being created so that Erin only has 10 minutes with her client and has 20 in the waiting room waiting for an equal 10 minutes. We need to address those systems as well. On an individual basis, I also think that it is important, again, the coalition building and the leaning on other organizations to be able to have conversations. For instance, MomCares, and I'm very proud because I didn't do any MomCares shout outs today. MomCares is an organization that serves Black women in particular going through a high-risk pregnancy. And high risk means it could be environmental, it could be physical, it could be mental. And so that means that you have to distill the information you're getting and ask questions before anything else. So, hey, what I'm hearing is X, Y, and Z. Would this be helpful if I gave you this? Would you have time to look at it later? I think it's really about us leaning into active listening, which is hard because we are being rushed to do so many things. But an exchange like that takes just a second if we can dial in and kind of center ourselves. And so I will give a shout out for my other life, the Rising Mama, where we work on wellness techniques and mindfulness in supporting the family unit as a whole. And so if you can take a breath before you walk into your next appointment, if you can set an intention before you turn that knob on the door, you'll make yourself a little bit more available to listen actively and then follow through. Patients are always asking questions. They want more information. We need to be asking questions of them as well. We are a community, a population right now emerging of consent. And so we need to ask our patients for consent. I feel like this is happening. Could I give this to you? And if they say no, then no. If someone came, again, with my story, if someone came in and said, hey, I feel like you might need some formula. Can I send you can I give you this WIC information? I would be like, no, thank you. I don't need it. I don't apply, right? But that conversation is important and it builds trust. Again, I'm
that was
talking,
exceptional. No. That was like an exceptional way of putting it, because that was actually a question that kind of popped in my head as you were presenting. A lot of folks walk away from these sessions sort of searching for action items of like, what are ways that we can apply these ideas within the work we're doing? And that was a question I was going to ask you, were like some questions or discussion prompts that you might bring into your work, or even particularly your doula work, to really get your patients to direct what that care looks like, a way for them to be more explicit about what they're looking for or what they need. And I think you kind of just shared some of that, which is even basic practice we do in our day-to-day lives, which, do you want unsolicited advice, in a way of like, do you, what I hear you saying, like what you had said, this active listening, repeating that back to them and being like, would you like more information on this? Or would you be interested in this? Or, trying to address even, like how we shouldn't be making assumptions about what information they are seeking at that time.
And absolutely. And also, so what I teach my doulas, because I'm a doula trainer, is the most important tools you have on you are on you. So you have your hands, you have your voice, and you have your heart. And those are the three most important pieces, the most important tools that you can bring to any relationship with a client or someone who is seeking service from you, right? And so so I would also say your voice incorporates your ears, because active listening and all other things, you guys got it. But we want to make sure that they're very easy things. I think as people who are active in the numbers and what's happening in the crises that are emerging, we can be very cerebral when we just go back to the human. I am a human, you're a human. Relational work of making sure that the client and the service provider are on the same page. We work very hard, again, at MomCares to make sure that there's not a hierarchical relationship. People calling me miss and this, and it's like, no, first of all, you're 10 years older than me, so stop. Second of all, there is no difference between me and my clients. There might be a difference of time. There might be a difference of opportunity that has been developed over time. But MomCares was brought out of the fact that I did not have resources or support. And so the people that I'm serving are my equals. And serving them as an equal and a lot opens up my ability to gain from them whatever intellect or whatever information that they want to share with me as a provider, and makes me able to relate enough to them to make sure that their needs are provided and they can walk away from an interaction with me feeling empowered, feeling powerful, feeling respected. I see your hand. You come off of mute, or is it on purpose?
No, it was on purpose. Thank you. So I know you're not plugging MomCares, but if you were to be talking a little bit more about your organization, I'm from Howard County and I represent Howard County, and I'm always in Howard County looking for resources to direct our moms to, because on the opposite side, Howard County is perceived as a county that has enough, like as a whole has enough, but we find that our moms we don't have enough, and because of that, we don't have resources like your group that are active in our county that can be a referral source. So do you solely serve women in the Baltimore area? You're more open to other a broader range? Like what's your services?
So this is my answer to that. Currently, we have funding and support from the larger community to be able to support Baltimore. We recognize and acknowledge that that this issue is not only regionally, it is nationwide, and the hope and the intention is that MomCares will be able to go nationwide at some point. With that being said, the capacity of my staff that I take care of, that take care of our mamas, needs to be supported by funding. And so those who are interested in bringing work to their communities, I'm absolutely interested and open to having that conversation. We have a whole template and presentation about what that looks like if that should happen. But we really need to understand that although the work and this is just not just from MomCares, but just nonprofits in general, the work is not free, right? And so we need to make sure that when we're having conversations about accessing services, that we're also prepared to having conversations about how to support the access of those services. So I would say hit me on the hip if you're interested. Anybody on the call, but that's the answer to that question. And we serve Black women in particular who are navigating a high-risk pregnancy, body, environmental, mental, high risk, and or have had a traumatic birth outcome resulting in a NICU involvement.
That's really helpful. And I loved that plug too, because I think that does also bring us back to those three big points that you were talking about like systems level change and incorporation of grassroots into where we already have these streams of funding and these partnerships with institutions, and letting our grassroots, like community driven groups like actually be part of that facilitation of change, but funding them for that. Another question that came up was, what are recommendations that you can make for providers of adolescents who are pregnant?
Okay, so before I start yammering, could you tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for as far as recommendations? You can, if you feel comfortable coming off mute. Or I could yammer. I'm good at yammering. So while you might be typing, so while you're typing, hopefully, I will say that I don't feel like there's much of a difference between the care of an adolescent and the care of an adult when it comes to reproductive health. How to discuss these issues with people. Oh, okay. And so again, so yes, I'm answering the question correctly. Great. So I think, again, it's very humanistic, especially for young mothers. MomCares, we run a young mothers program. Again, I've said MomCares 3 times. I said I wasn't going to do that, but we serve young mothers through a summer program. And a lot of that work that we do to serve those mothers is about building them as their confidence as mothers, because at this point they will be mothers, right? They will be parents. And so there's no amount of, oh, don't do that, don't do this, or you shouldn't have done this, or, you should have, now you're in trouble, or whatever the heck we say to young people. Again, making it very humanistic and talking to them and coming to where they are. And so an adolescent might not talk to you in the same way or have the same cues, but listening to an adolescent the same way you would listen to an adult will yield the same result. And so I would say that making sure that you are, again, listening and building trust. And the thing is, with adolescents, because they are surrounded by folks that are telling them, you shouldn't have, now look at you, or, you're not in control, or whatever, that point of light that is created by someone respecting them and speaking to them as someone that is a human, that is a peer to them in some way, shape, or form, will open up, a fountain of information and sharing, in my experience. So I think just talking to them, and again, asking them, hey, have you heard of this? Do you know what this is? Has your doctor talked to you about this? How do you feel about that? And again, what, in my experience, finding, talking to young mothers, they're absolutely flabbergasted when you talk to them as if they have some understanding or autonomy of what's going on with their body.
That's a great way to put it, of like recentering on like the human side, which I think, and you even had said that multiple times, of like, go back to the human, like do not assume. And so why wouldn't you refer to adults in that way? Like you said, they're about to be parents, like let them, they're part of these decision making, will be parenting, like.
Right. And I feel like also, so bias is there, right? We can't help but relate our reality to what we've experienced and who we are as people. And so I believe in leaning in on that bias. And part of that is, how would I feel if I was sitting here? How would I feel if I was the patient? How would I feel if I was trying to access service? How would I feel if I didn't understand the language and I needed help? How would I feel if I was trying to flee domestic violence and pregnant and scared? Like, how would I feel, right? What would I want? And so I think starting there, and again, how I feel or what I want might not be what that person wants, but it recenters my ability to have a conversation, and again, rehumanizes that, especially when there are a barrage of people coming in and out of your door, and there's this expectation to create these magical outcomes with 5 minutes of service to each person. Taking a moment, yes, the gold belly cast in the back, that's the last one. He had me big. But yes, we'll talk about that later. So all of that to say, again, talkie, is that centering the very human ideals of respect and autonomy and safety and support, right? We all want those things when we're going through something as something that makes us as vulnerable as being in the reproductive health arena, right? So thank you. But yes, that one, the gold one is Asher, the green one is postpartum Aiden. And it was part of an art installment at Creative Alliance a couple of years ago. So.
Okay, can I say something? I didn't raise my hand.
Of course.
I just want to first thank you for just bringing the truths to the front that many of us know, but just aren't spoken. And in this community of trying to help and give guidance, it's nice to have someone identify those truths for our population, people of color, people of different ethnicities. And I just want to thank you. That's just so huge. And yes, just because you have these resources, it doesn't mean that that mom wants that resource. And you do have to have that conversation. Offering is so right with just changing the process of how that looks. I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And that brings me, I guess, to my last my benediction, I guess. So a couple of disclaimers. I operate in this world and I support in this world Black women who come from or have some type of a history of poverty or need for additional support. And so that is the frame that I work with when I am presenting out. I want to acknowledge that there are a number of identities that I have never experienced, that I do not feel comfortable, and I would never assume I had the ability to speak on. And so any absence of me speaking of those today is not an erasure of that. It is me wanting to make sure that I am speaking about the population that I am familiar with and the experiences of them. But I do want to acknowledge that just like everybody else, I have blind spots. And I want that to be clear, because some people are like, oh, you're a Black woman, you're at the bottom of the rung, you know everything. And it's like, no, I also have blind spots as well. And I want to make sure that in saying that, I want to be brave enough to say that so that everybody else on the call can acknowledge their blind spots as well. And so that's what I'll end with.
Thank you so much, Anna. And we made sure to drop your contact information in the chat box, and we'll definitely make sure all attendees will get that so they can reach out to you. You just have so many flowers happening right now in this chat box. So I hope you are able to take it in. It's wonderful. And to all of our attendees today, thank you so much for attending today's webinar, with the start of our whole summer virtual learning series. In the next few days, all attendees will receive the meeting resources and a link to today's session recording. Recordings and materials and presentations will be housed on the Maryland Department of Health website. And so don't worry, you'll get those links by the end of the summer. If you have not done so already, please make sure you take a moment to fill out the evaluation. It's beneficial for us, but it's also a space, that we can share back information to Anna, accolades and feedback of like all of this, and to keep up her amazing work. And certificates of attendance were considered opt-in during registration for the sessions and will be sent out by the end of the week by our partners at Healthy Teen Network. If you did not opt in or have a question around that, please feel free to reach out to Shanice. So, as Anna was saying, make sure you're taking care of yourselves, today, and taking care of your community. And thank you so much for being here with us. And Anna, absolutely big, glorious thank you for today's presentation and getting us started on the series and setting intentions for the series and our work moving forward. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing from folks. I want my email blowing up. I hope everybody has a wonderful day and takes some time to themselves as they get back into the workday.
All right, thank you everyone, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.